Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Serbian Corner, a show where a couple of Serbians talk about the Nuggets on the DNVR YouTube channel and the DNVR Nuggets podcast feed. So what we do on this show is a weekly recap of Nuggets basketball, quick takeaways, main teams, disagreements, and everything else. My name is Miroslav, calling you from not too distant future from Pančevo, Serbia, 6 hours away from Dan and 8 hours away from Denver. And this time I'm not joined by Voja Medic, who is tied up at work, but have no fear. You're not going to be exposed to me rambling by myself for an hour. We are already in the off-season mode, so we normally have just one segment on Casual Fridays. But since Adam and the boys are golfing today, I felt the need to hop in and give you guys your Nuggets daily fix via this impromptu show. To make it more special, I've asked a good friend of the show to join me. He is a co-host of one of my favorite general NBA podcasts, Hardwood, a writer for the Bleacher report, and also one of the most fun NBA Twitter follows, not to mention a super nice guy, Mr. Dan Favale. Welcome, Dan.
Oh, that was one heck of an intro. Thank you so much for having me. Always happy to hop on and chat with you.
Are you super busy these days?
Yes, I'm always busy. That's my default setting, but can't complain. I cover a freaking game for a living, so I cannot complain.
How many teams have you already covered on the Hardwood Knocks in the off-season mode, or are you still going division by division or something like that?
So we've done like biggest questions for 26 of the 30 teams. It was just as they were eliminated from the season, and we might have more extensive like primers once we get past the NBA finals. But people for general NBA podcasts, people seem to love the free agency and trade content, and so we're about to get into a whole lot of that since it's about to become the trade season part 2. There's the trade deadline, and then there's just the off season. They're just wild when it comes to transactions.
So I couldn't recommend more to everybody who is looking for more NBA content during the off season. Go and listen to Dan and his co-host Adam Favale as well on the Hardwood Knocks to grab some more info, because very soon we are going to be without games, so we need to latch onto something before the new season begins. Okay, so the reason I've called you to join me today is the fact that even though us Serbs usually have unique perspective on all things Nuggets, I wanted to add to that outside perspective from a very well-informed national media member that could better see the forest for the trees. So that this
Why'd you bring me on then?
Okay, so let's start with our first segment, which is called the Rakia shot. So let me just put it. Yeah, this one here. Okay, so Rakia is a Serbian national alcoholic drink, usually taken before dinner to make a toast. So what this segment will be is the quick headline, something that made impression on us quickly and strongly. This week's Rakia shot is the Tim Connolly news in the Denver Nuggets. Dan, I've seen some of the your tweets about the departure of Tim Connolly, so I'm eager to know, what kind of message do you think the Nuggets as an organization is sending to its fans and to NBA free agents with letting their president of basketball operations to their division rival?
I don't know if it's a particularly strong message, but if it is, it's not a great one. And the Nuggets have ponied up for their talent before, the players, including the ones that they have on the roster at this moment. We know they're going to super max out Nikola Jokic. They currently are slated to pay a ton in luxury tax payments next season. That being said, they've always kind of skimped on the front office side. It just so happens that they've done a good job of developing and having these front office minds in place. And you lose Masai Ujiri, Tim Connolly's here. You lose him, but Calvin Booth, everything you read about him, he's sort of just this draft-obsessed, detail-oriented person. And he was instrumental in trying to get the Timberwolves to draft Jamal Murray, but Tom Thibodeau wanted Chris Dunn instead. Look how that turned out. And so there's Calvin Booth, ton of respect for him, and it seems like he's going to do a very good job. But you got to stop becoming like this farm system in the front office for these other franchises at some point. And I understand that Connolly got an offer that not only doubled his salary from Denver, but you got an ownership stake, which really that rarely ever happens. And so I understand that part. You can lean on that if you're the Nuggets from when you're looking at the fallout and saying, okay, well, what were we supposed to do? How about never let it get to a point where he was just free to leave in the first place? He had that dalliance with I think it was the Wizards, was it 2 years ago, whatever it was. And I don't know if he used that as leverage or if it was always in his contract that they were just going to pay him less than market value or not top dollar. And he would have the flexibility to leave if he saw fit. You can't let things like that happen because he was super important to assembling this team. And at some point, the well is going to run dry, especially because the Nuggets are known as just a smaller operation in general. When you're looking at the front office, it's almost it's not almost, it's absolutely impressive with what they've been able to do, given the size of their staff relative to some of these other teams. At some point, though, you have to believe that you're not just going to hit perfectly on your next hire or your next replacement. I'm not saying that's Calvin Booth. He might be fine, but Calvin Booth is probably, if he's great, he's going to end up getting paid by another franchise that is in Denver down the line. So I think that's a troubling message. And I don't think it does anything to the team materially right now. It's looking long-term, whereas you are going to have to flesh out the next era of basketball at some point. Are you going to have enough people in place, the right people in place, to just get your franchise into a good spot to where it's either segueing out of this era at any point, whether it's a rebuild or insta contention. And if you don't, that could set you back years. And so it's not an imminent problem, but I don't think it's a particularly encouraging message when this is a reoccurring thing, is the Nuggets, the Cronkies just not paying to keep really, really good front office talent.
Yeah. And, when you see a company that is always promoting from inside and never getting, outside talent to put in the top positions, that means that this company is either really smart or really cheap. And I guess you can say both of those things for the Nuggets organization. They've really been able to buy, low on the front office and coaching stuff during the years. And every year we see at least one assistant coach leaving for a higher position in another team, or maybe for a better salary elsewhere. So yeah, they're building kind of a legacy both in in the front office and in the coaching stuff. But it's really getting annoying to Nuggets fans to watch every year one of their favorite guys leaving for greener grass, I guess. What do you think about Michael Malone's safety as a head coach now that Tim Connolly is out? Because he was hired by Tim Connolly, and when a new general manager enters, even though Calvin Booth was already a general manager before, but he had a Tim Connolly on top of him, and this is the first time he is the guy. So if he has a short-term contract, he could always try to make, let's say the Nuggets don't have a really deep playoff run next season. The first thing he could do is just fire Malone, right? Just to save his ass and try to prolong his tenure on the Nuggets. What do you think about that? And Voja is just...
Hey, guys.
Hi, Voja.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Sorry I'm late. I was getting done with an experiment.
Excellent. So what do you think about Michael Malone's security at the head coach position now?
I think, look, there's a chance it would have become an issue no matter what, because the Nuggets are getting to a point where if they underachieve next season, if they're more healthy, or if there's injuries again and they finish 7th or 6th in the West, whatever it is, maybe they take a step back from this year for whatever reason. You've gotten to the point where almost one of the only things you can do is change the coach. And so if Tim Connolly was still in charge, that probably becomes a topic if the Nuggets underachieve. And so maybe it makes it more likely now if Calvin Booth wants to put his stamp on the team. I would guess just because he's been with the Nuggets for a while that there should be at least more synergy there between he and Michael Malone. And if you're just the franchise in general, I know Nikola Jokic is super low maintenance, but he had a great relationship with Tim Connolly. He has a fantastic relationship with Michael Malone. you can only get rid of so many people who he is close to, like in consecutive seasons, in my mind. And look, he's been low maintenance, great. Don't take advantage of that. And you already have, in my opinion, by letting Tim Connelly go. So I wouldn't expect it to become an issue unless the Nuggets are just bad or flat out underachieving next year. And I do think when you look at this season, and the seeds are stupid because of how close some of the win totals are, but they're sixth. When you look at the talent on the roster, that is a disappointment, but you have the context of the injuries that helped Nikola Jokic win MVP. That is probably where you'll see the biggest difference, where if those are injuries you're dealing with again, because Michael Porter Jr. has those serial back issues, maybe Jamal Murray doesn't look the same, you're not going to have that, I guess, perceptional cushion. And that could lead the franchise to, again, look at Michael Malone's security if they don't think that they can move Murray or Michael Porter Jr. or do anything else to upgrade the roster. They are, given how much they're paying their core, getting to a point where if something does go wrong, you're going to just start looking at the coach, because that is one of the few things that you're able to change.
Voja, what do you think? We haven't been able to hear your opinion about the fallout of Tim Connelly leaving, and just to latch to the last question about how should Michael Malone feel about the whole thing right now?
I mean, honestly, considering how Nuggets have shown with the organization, you guys talked about it, and Dan, you're right. There's so much advantage they should be able to be allowed to take advantage of Jokic's low maintenance. I mean, Malone's got to wonder at this point, if they're willing to, get away from Conley at this point. He's not safe. He wasn't safe in Sacramento. And you're right, with the underachieving next year, that is one of the things. First of all, it wouldn't be unfair completely to look at him if the roster's completely full and healthy. If they're underachieving, maybe it is something with him, which I don't think it is. He's a good coach. And I don't know. I was kind of MIA with the Conley thing, because I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I was never that invested in president of basketball operations stuff. It does suck because he was really good, and he was really, that culture was built by him. The guys at DNVR talked about it extensively this week. So that is concerning that you're willing to sacrifice that foundational piece of who built this attitude towards basketball that the Nuggets have, because it's the guys that he chose that also are complementary to this team and that Jokic's psyche of hey, this is a team first sport. We want to bring players that believe in that as well. And it's not an accident. All these guys like Bones, Monte, all these people were drafted to the Nuggets, and some of the other guys throughout the league weren't. So we'll see. I mean, the thing is, you'll be right about Booth. He might eventually be hey, it's me or you at this point if we underachieve. I hope they don't. I mean, I really don't think that they will. It's the beast of the NBA. You see the Grizzlies are so deep this year, and I said this whole year, they were so similar to me with the Nuggets in 2018-19, that they had such a deep roster that they can, with all the injuries, they can still be winning. Now Nuggets are front loaded, and you have a couple of guys go out and you're in trouble. So I don't know. I think it was bad to not sign Conley, obviously, and now they're on alert, the whole organization, and I would see Jokic being pissed if Malone is the next one to go. Obviously, I wouldn't blame him either.
Oh yeah. Okay. So let's now let's now skip to a better subject. The off season is approaching fast. The draft is in 3.5 weeks right now. So we are now going to the burek of the week. And burek is a nice juicy pastry dish that comes either with cheese, spinach, or meat, and is well known because Nikola Jokic used to eat it a lot when he was younger, around the time he was turning pro. So this segment will be best thing of the week that we liked the most, that was the juiciest story, performance, or a whole game. Now we don't have any Nuggets games, so we have to latch on the little pieces of news we get during the week. So basically, our high calorie count topic we like the most. So Dan, let's start with this, and this is also a downer. What is, in your opinion, the most glaring weakness of this Nuggets roster right now?
I think it's probably point of attack defense. You could make a case for shooting in theory, but it's they just didn't have Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. That's going to work itself out if they're healthy. And a team, you could have really crummy shooters around Nikola Jokic. You're just going to have space because he finds a way to generate it for you with his passing and then just, I mean, him being himself. And so I think you need to try and find guys or a guy who's going to alleviate the burden on Aaron Gordon, who has just been overtaxed and miscast now at every NBA stage of his career. They were trying to use him too much on offense in Orlando. They had him shouldering some pretty heavy defensive burdens. He comes over to Denver, and it's like the perfect fit on paper, but he finds himself being even used more heavily as a point of attack defender while also not having the perfect offensive role just yet because you didn't have Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. So they really need to get what I would coin as like the best or second best defender that would be on this team. And I don't know necessarily how you go about that outside of a trade unless you get lucky in free agency, just because we know they, if they're willing to spend it, the most they're going to be able to use is that mini mid-level exception this summer. So there are guys that spring to mind when you think about that, like a Bruce Brown who's entering free agency if he decides to leave Brooklyn. And if I'm the Nuggets, I'm not worried too much about the offensive impact of those players I'm bringing in because, again, Nikola Jokic is going to find ways to get even non-shooters moving towards the basket or just higher-end opportunities. And someone like Bruce Brown specifically shot the ball extremely well from three this year on very little volume, but that's an encouraging sign if you're looking at him specifically. I do believe that's the route you have to go. If you're going to upgrade this team, whether it's on the margins or take a bigger swing on the trade market, I believe that needs to be your focus. And if it's not, that probably says that you don't have a great deal of faith in Michael Porter Jr. and or Jamal Murray remaining healthy for most of next season. And that's an entirely different issue that you then have to contend with.
Yeah, that's a whole different conversation. Which is kind of would be downer if the offseason turns out to be what you're saying is they don't pull any of those moves. You're like, oh, damn it, they're not really having any faith in this year again. So it's like 3 years now of that was actually of Jokic's prime. Yeah, and
that was actually our whole season. The season that just ended for the Nuggets was basically that. We were just waiting. Okay, another month. Okay, push for another 4 weeks. Hopefully, we'll be fine. Now Michael Porter is about to come back before Jamal Murray. Okay, now nobody's talking about Michael Porter anymore. Now we're waiting for Jamal and so on, and it just never happened.
It was crazy. I don't know if you guys saw. Did you guys see someone screenshot it? Like, was it before All-Star break, entering All-Star break, the odds for winning the title or reaching the finals or something? Golden State was at like 10% according to them, and then Denver was at 14 because they were assuming Jamal and Porter would be back because those were the news at that point. Like Jamal was supposed to be around All-Star, and I'm like, that's crazy. The Nuggets, not right now, looking back at it, thinking that roster is like, there's no way they have more of a chance to go to the finals than the Warriors. But I agree with the point of attack, and this year kind of proved that concept. What you're saying is the Jokic will find space no matter who's around him. Like no matter how bad they're shooting, it seems like he can get his quote unquote, but in a flow of offense as well. Like against the Warriors, they weren't shooting that well in a few of those games where they were just when they took him to the edge to the end of last 3 games. And he was still getting like really good numbers and producing, and the whole season, obviously, like they were double, triple team at certain stages. So that you're right. I completely agree. Like Bruce Brown, if they can pull him, like there would be a great get, like someone like that. And then you can talk about trades with Barton and trying to consolidate that part of it too. Yeah, I agree. That's a great point.
Funny you should mention Bruce Brown because Dan Favale actually mentioned Bruce Brown as a great target for the Nuggets in his article a couple of weeks ago. So we'll get on that as well. One interesting thing for me, a couple of weeks ago, the great Caitlin Cooper had a tweet saying that out of the 4 last teams left in the playoffs, there was only one player that was 6'10" or taller, and that's Dwight Powell for the Dallas Mavericks, and he sucked actually in that series. So I'm not now trying to ask you if the Nuggets should trade Nikola Jokic. I want to ask you, should Nuggets keep DeMarcus Cousins or try to keep DeMarcus Cousins as their backup 5? Is there a viable advantage to have such a big backup center for the playoffs next season? Dan.
I think if you can keep him, it makes sense to having the relationship that he has with Michael Malone, and also just someone you can use not similarly to Nikola Jokic, but you're not going to have to change your offense a ton when you're in the half court. Like, he can work from a lot of the same spots that Jokic does. If you're looking for a different type of backup center, then you're probably looking for functional diversification, which is fine. I just don't think that that's what you should be using your best spending tool on, which would be your mid-level exception this year. And also just the names of the centers. Like, you're not going to get a Nick Claxton or a Mitchell Robinson. You're probably not even going to be able to get, and you had in Isaiah Hartenstein, would have been fantastic for this team. If you can get Boogie back, and like, he's also not costing you, and I can't imagine he would, your best spending tool. I don't think it's a terrible option. If you really want to diversify what your backup 5 package looks like, Jeff Green is still under contract. And then I even think, I don't see it all the time, but I am just incredibly high on Zeke Naji. And I think that you could probably steal more backup 5 minutes with him over time. I know he's sort of viewed as like this pure 4 or whatever, but I think against certain matchups, especially what we've seen in the playoffs, and especially given how Zeke Naji can move, I do think that you can grab minutes from him there as well. So you don't need to make, in my mind, a huge to-do over the backup 5 spot, unless, again, you're really just looking to juice those, like, when it matters most, 8 to 10 minutes when Nikola Jokic isn't going to be on the floor. So if Boogie can come back and it's going to cost you the minimum, I absolutely think, based off how he played, what you might want out of your backup 5 on offense, that's totally fine, if not a good move by them.
Well, what do you think?
I think they should. Yeah, especially since he was playing better and better as the season was going on. Obviously, he got into shape. Like, one of our guys, Ice Cube guy, said basically they should have signed him for like end of the season and next year on a minimum. So before he starts playing well, so he doesn't outprice himself out of the Nuggets contract. I think they should have an option of having that center. That was what sucked about the Hardenstein thing. Is that they had him, and they had like JaMychal Green. That it just, with Malone, sometimes it's where like he has this specific rotation, and people complain about him all the time. And I'm one of them with the rigidity of the regular season. With his rotation, there's not a lot of like, hey, we'll try like Zeke for a few games and then see how it goes. And I think with Boogie is a vet. That gives you the option, because with Hardenstein, he needed minutes to actually develop, and he got that in Cleveland. Then he went to the Clippers this year too, and now he's probably going to be a regular rotation for them. Is with veterans, they understand and like how it works. So like you can sit them, and they know whatever you plug them in. Rivers was out of it for a few games this year, and then he's back because he was ready. He knows how to be a professional. So I think it would be paramount to have that option of like a big center, because you hit the nail on the head, Dan, with the style of play when Jokic is out. When you have Boogie, it doesn't change philosophically, I guess. Like, you can obviously with Murray there, you can run him through pick and rolls and stuff, but he can pass. Like, he's a big presence there. You're not changing like, oh, we're going completely small ball 5 out, and you have Monte. They used to play, he's used to playing with Jokic in those like overall rotation minutes, that then goes in. Now we're going 5 out, and then I have to like go to the rim, and we're not doing pick and roll. We saw that with like they were running teams out of the gym in Denver when Plumlee was there, just because they would have that continuity, and I really liked that. Obviously, for playoffs, it didn't work out for with the Lakers and stuff, but they had that rhythm, and so the guys on the bench would be used to playing that style, even though obviously no one's Jokic, but that idea of basketball that through a center that can pass. Then if in case of injuries, then they go into starting lineup, and they're used to now like playing that level again. So I think they should have as much, like, I think that's what Booth should be prioritizing, just have options on this roster, because we've seen them being injured a lot. So to have like safe bet, that's why there was a problem with PJ got hurt. He was like the only small forward. So have like as many options as you can, so you can mix and match like when you need to.
Yeah, I have to agree. Boogie is a great option for the regular season for sure. And even if you have to cut him out of the rotation for the playoff, that's not a problem if you actually manage to have 15 guys on the roster, on the regular roster spots that can all play. And if you can get Boogie and not use one of the exceptions for keeping him on, that's just that's a no-brainer for me. So I agree with both of you guys. Okay, now draft is approaching. Should the Nuggets keep or trade their first-round pick this season? The reason I'm asking this is because on the draft night, they can try and pull all-in move using their this year's pick and also a couple of first-round picks from the future and attach it to some salary, some players to try and get all-star level player. What do you think, Dan? Are you in favor of trying to pull something like that out, or maybe do it in stages, like just use this year's first round pick for one move at the draft night and maybe keep some picks for the trade deadline next year?
Yeah, I think it just depends on who's available. I think in a vacuum, it would make sense to move the pick after you take it, just because this is not, depending on who's available. If you really like one of the prospects I've grown to like for them is Marjan Beauchamp. Feels like he could come in, be 3-and-D right away. But we've seen that normally the playoffs, the finals, the highest levels of basketball are not going to be accessible or impacted by youth. The Warriors might be an exception. And like Kuminga even looked overmatched in a bunch of his postseason minutes. And look at how long it's Jordan Poole's in year 3. And this is what it's taken to get him to that level. So there's a way to get immediate help. You absolutely should consider, especially if it's addressing some of your biggest needs. The scale of it, though, is just going to depend, because when you're talking about moving other picks, like they, in theory, can trade 2027 and 2029. That's really, really far away. And you can question whether even teams will value those picks, because most front offices don't have the type of job stability that we see from, certain ones like a Masai Ujiri in Toronto or Tim Connolly before he left Denver. So that changes the complexion of offers, but they have just some interesting middle rung contracts. They can, if teams want to pick and they're looking to get rid of just a veteran because they're going in a different direction or they're worried about his next contract, they certainly can do some things. I do think the ultra aggressive move, and I know you sent this on the rundown, so I don't mean to jump ahead. It's going to come down to, are you putting Bones Highland on the table? And that is, in a perfect world, I'm saying no. But if you believe that Jamal Murray is going to be fine, then Bones Highland absolutely has to be on the table if the right player becomes available, because he is your single biggest trade asset right now. Realistic trade asset anyway. It's not Michael Porter Jr. with that contract kicking in. It's not even Jamal Murray. If you thought they would consider moving him coming off an ACL injury, you're not moving Nikola Jokic. That would be absolutely bonkers. So it's Bones Highland. And it's just not even close.
And what do you think is the level of player that Nuggets could land for a Bones and, let's say, a first round pick or 2 and some salary?
I think the ceiling on it, and people in Canada will probably be extremely mad at me, is an OG Anunoby. If you include a Bones Highland, who doesn't necessarily fit the Raptors defensive motif, but I fully believe that he might end up being a lead guard someday in the NBA after watching him this season. I had no idea. The shooting was probably undersold somehow, but I had just no idea him coming into the NBA about his passing and how comfortable he looks making decisions when turning corners. There's probably some questions about what does he look like if you're putting the ball in his hand, slowing it down a bunch. But he was a rookie. And making an impact on a team that went to the playoffs. If you're attaching him to this year's first, you have other salaries. Like Zeke Naji is going to be an asset to certain teams because he's so cheap. You also have the salary matching tools in Will Barton, also Monte Morris, JaMychal Green going into the final year of his deal. I love JaMychal Green. He was terrible this past year, but he's on an expiring contract. That's an asset. So if you were really willing to throw the kitchen sink, and Toronto's thinking not necessarily long-term, but okay, we have Scotty Barnes. There's no trading Siakam anymore. He's fantastic. I don't even know why that was a thing in the first place. We have Fred VanVleet. OG almost seems out of place now on offense. And I think you could argue the version of him that they used on offense this year might actually be the best role for him, but it does get a little jumbled in Toronto pretty quickly. And so I could see him being available for the right price. And I think Bones Highland is tantalizing enough to put you in those conversations. Again, not alone. Bones Highland plus salary is not getting you OG Anunoby. But if you were willing, well, you should be willing to include this year's first. If you're also willing to include a distant first, Zeke Najee, if maybe there are going to be teams that like Will Barton. There are going to be teams that love Monte Morris. My co-host is in love with Monte Morris.
Yeah, we
know. I think there are more options available to the Nuggets on the trade market than people actually credit, because I don't think they understand. And maybe it's not understand. Maybe we just don't fully grasp, especially at a national level, how valuable Bones Highland is, just how high level of a prospect he became.
Yeah. You just made me giggle with the OG Anunoby take, because, you know, first of all, both Voja and I love him so much, and it would be so ironic, and it would be a full circle on him, because actually he was the reason the Nuggets had a debacle in that what was it, 2018 draft?
No, it was 16 or 17.
Yeah, maybe 17.
The Tyler Lydon, the same year as Monte was drafted. Yeah.
So they traded back because they thought OG Anunoby would be available. They tried to be cute and to get OG Anunoby on a lower draft pick, and then they ended up with Tyler Lydon and Trey Lyles they got from Utah.
Lyles was before. Lyles was on the Mitchell. That was for the Mitchell pick or something like that.
Yeah.
Lyles and Lydon were the same draft. Yeah. Because Lyles was already 2 years in the league when they got.
That might have been it might have been like that year with the Mitchell. They moved back from 13 to try to get OG Anunoby and Trey Lyles.
They gave away practically Donovan Mitchell to get two power forwards. Theoretically can shoot, but never could on the Nuggets.
Well, you said with the trade with the pick, like how willing they would be to trade that pick is one of those we mentioned. Trey Lyles thing. Are you getting Jeremy Grant or Trey Lyles? If you want to, because we got Grant for first pick, and that worked okay. I mean, obviously, it wasn't a complete fit that year. I don't know if Malone was just not plugging him in. If they didn't realize at that point, like, oh, he's just a 3, like we should just have him at a 3, or like a combo 3-4 with Michael Porter, and then in the bubble they figured it out eventually. But yeah, but then are you getting Trey Lyles, which was a perfectly fine player, but will he get you over the top? With Bones, I mean, it's, as much as it hurts me, like I love OG, but he also is. I think both of them have the issue of, like, with the injuries, like quote unquote issue. Like OG was hurt a bunch, but then eventually played and he was good. Bones was brittle at some point. He would like twist his ankles a bunch of times until which is, I guess, I think also comes with with some rookies. Like he just needs to get used to the just balancing and level of NBA. But man, OG would be fun. Because again, it would be like a Gordon thing. He might have a reduced role, which would elevate his game in some ways. He wouldn't be relied maybe beginning of the season. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. Like he was doing a lot of ball handling when Siakam was out, and they were giving him a bunch of that stuff. And then he got hurt. He was really doing well, but then he got hurt. And
his season was really stop and start with his availability, which I think hurt him because he wasn't great this past year. And so maybe if you're the Raptors, that's why you don't move him. And again, I think he'd probably be like the loftiest possible acquisition for Denver. Otherwise, you're looking at and these players would help. Phoenix is going to be preparing to either pay Ayton, or maybe they're worried about Cam Johnson's next extension. Is Jay Crowder on the table? That's someone who works. Another name that's bringing to mind for me, I think he's going into the final year of his deal. Dylan Brooks in Memphis. They have Kyle Anderson, Tyus Jones are free agents. They paid Jaren Jackson Jr. They're about to extend John Morant. Is that someone that they view as, and look, they're a team that has Zaire Williams, clearly believes in their ability to draft. And so if you put your first round pick on the table, Memphis already has 2 in this draft. I'm not giving up, to be clear. I wouldn't give up Bones for a Jay Crowder or a Dylan Brooks. I'm trying to think of names where you could include equity. Maybe Najee's involved in there. Salary filler that helps, like a Will Barton probably helps Memphis a ton when you look at the structure of their offense right now. Does that get you a Dylan Brooks? And so like those scale of moves, I think, are even at least within the realm of possibility for the Nuggets.
With both fan bases like tear up their hair, like it's like, oh, we got rid of Brooks, oh, we got Will Barton. It's like the shot selection grade.
I find Will Barton more digestible to watch than Dylan Brooks.
I think so, yeah. But then on reverse it on defense, like Barton is almost unwatchable sometimes, and then Dylan Brooks can do good things. And it's just funny. Yeah, well, I love because Denver Nuggets fans can throw Will Barton on the bus a lot. And I kind of gave up on him by the end of the season on some of the things he was doing. But it would have been funny just seeing how with Brooks, just like, oh, we got rid of Barton. Oh, now it's Brooks. And you see about, like, I don't know how much people have watched Memphis over the year, but it's like some of the shots that he takes. I think people would lose their minds, like just
vast
waving off
of the shots.
Waving off Jokic and like pulling up for three, like a step back three. That would really go over well in Ball Arena.
One name that is circulating around Nuggets fans a lot last few weeks is Dort. Do you think that would you be willing to part with Bones Highland to get Dort on the Nuggets, or is it too steep of a price for that?
I personally would not, because Dort is entering the final year of his contract, and he is spotty.
You need to pay him. Him.
And he is so spotty on the offensive end. I don't have a problem paying players, but I'm more confident. Like if he gets OG Anunoby money, or let's say he gets less than OG Anunoby money, which he should. He's not as good as OG Anunoby. I'd still feel way more comfortable paying an OG Anunoby. I would look. This has probably become like a meme at this point. I'd feel more comfortable running it back with Jeremy Grant than I would in bringing in a Lou Dort, just because his offense makes me a little nervous. And I also want, if I'm the Nuggets, a bigger body in there as well. And like Lou Dort, someone said this on Twitter. I think his name is David Brandon. And I laugh every time I think about it because it's so perfect. Lou Dort is built like a Mack truck that is made up of a bunch of smaller Mack trucks. He's just not like especially huge. And so I do think there are matchups that could hurt, like that he can't handle. Whereas if you have a Jeremy Grant and OG Anunoby, you can be a little bit more flexible with moving them up the positional spectrum, or the archetype spectrum, so to speak, on defense. So I wouldn't give up Bones for him. If you're talking a first round pick, if you're talking other stuff, then yeah, I would consider it. But that's not a good enough player to me to give up Bones for right now.
Yeah, because it could be a similar, like with OKC, it was the first pick for Jeremy Grant on the last year of the deal, and he didn't.
They had a trade exception for it to be possible,
true,
to get.
No, I'm just saying, like, just ideally, maybe you obviously first and maybe like matching salary or whatever for the deal, but he being the last year of his contract, you would hope he signs with Denver next year, or like if you get him. That was an interesting suggestion. I was my dream pick, which is one of those, like, I love Villanova guys. It would be Josh Hart if they can pull him with somehow through like a Portland sign and trade, whatever thing is. I'm not really big, like I'm not really an off-season guy, so like I don't know these salary caps like manipulation. So I'm like in
don't
this
worry,
case,
the Kings front office aren't off-season people either, so you're good.
Fair. And so that's like that would be like a guy that I would love to see in a Barton place. It's like be Murray, Hart, Michael Porter, Gordon, Jokic. Like I don't know if that would solve like the point of attack defense as much, because he is a good defender. I don't know how good. I haven't followed his like career with the last few years that closely, but I love him as an idea, I guess, with the Nuggets, that type of player.
Yeah, if he's available, for sure. If I'm the Blazers and you're keeping Damian Lillard, you have to keep him, because
you
just trade. First of all, I don't think we're making enough about how the Blazers traded Larry Nance Jr., Robert Covington, CJ McCollum, and Norman Powell, and did not get back a first-round pick in this year's draft. That is malpractice. And so Hart has that non-guaranteed salary. I think it's like 12-something million. He's a bargain on that. And if the Blazers do pivot, that's certainly a name to look at. I still, and maybe this just speaks to how high I am on Bones, and maybe that's irrational, I'm not giving up Bones for Josh Hart either. And it's not. I was
thinking more like a Barton like swap or something like that, like a salary matching.
I'd be curious to see what the level of player Barton, Najee, and this year's first round pick would be able to.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Because that's things like we're so low on Barton because of just how sour the season ended. Again, he was also hobbled by the end of it, and he's put a lot of miles on his body over the years. That's why that's what you're right. Like I wonder, objective, like coming from other, like from national perspective, like how much they would get, because if you don't follow closely, like Barton didn't have a bad season when you look at his statistics and like some of his stuff, like it was pretty decent. But like you watch all
it's
the time,
just the
like,
defense, man. It's just
defense. That's the thing, is we have to watch it all the time to see that, and that's like people did and like how much they value. KCP was one of those guys. Someone throw it in the chat.
I think, see, when you're looking at KCP is perfect, so is Josh Hart. you're talking about teams that as of now are still trying to win, and that's where it gets where you can see the Raptors at least. The Raptors are just different with how they operate, so maybe you could see them making a move like that. You need to find teams that are maybe looking to cut costs, and I think what helps you with Will Barton, he's probably still most valuable as an expiring contract leading into next year. But he's been better defensively in the past. And I think it's also different when he needs to be your third, fourth, or even fifth best offensive player versus I think you could argue the Nuggets need him to be like their second on certain nights this year. So that change. And like you said, he's banged up and he's had some injury histories in the past as well. So I don't think you get a ton for him, but just because you have, if you're willing to trade your first and Zeke Naji and he is an expiring contract, I don't think it gets you into the highest level conversations, but I don't think that that's like this laughable offer that teams are going to be, not willing to entertain.
Oh, it's not, I agree. It's not laughable at all. Like that'll be interesting. We'll see. That'll be fun.
Okay.
That's why Calvin Booth, that's why, it's an important offseason for him.
We are really hoping for Calvin Booth to show his aggressiveness now in the trade market and the free agent market as well, because that's something that Tim Connolly was known for, being really, really cautious about making moves, not to make a bad move. And he really did architect a really, really good roster, really good culture because of it. But I don't think the Nuggets have enough time with Nikola Jokic to be extra careful in the future. We need to see some moves to strengthen the roster.
What do you think, Miroslav, because Dan mentioned like with Barton, as a fourth or fifth option, we've seen him be good like that after the trade last year. Do you think if they don't make any moves, that aggressive moves, and be like, hey, we'll run it back, we saw how good we were with him as a fourth or fifth, do you think that's playing with fire? Because if things don't go well, like how then people, they might even decrease his value through the year, and you might not just get anything back.
I really think that if Will Barton is not moved in July, that means that he's just a expiring contract after that. Because if you're waiting for the trade deadline, you're just basically trading his 13 minutes, or no, it's not 13, it's 15 million, 16 million of contract he has right now. And that's a value because a lot of teams are looking to offload salary at the end of the season. So you can get, honestly, if they will not be able to move Will Barton at this offseason, I think they should move him to the bench and try to make something else work and just use him as a secondary or even a primary ball handler off the bench. And I really think his best role for this upcoming season is to go to a rebuilding team, get a lot of minutes, but not to be pushed above his powers, so he can stay healthy and get another good contract, because he's like 31 right now, and he should be able to get another good contract
just one more
somewhere.
Maybe.
And problem about that is he's maybe too good for a rebuilding team, because he might get too many wins for a Oklahoma City team or for, I don't know, Orlando Magic team next season. So that might be a problem. But, rebuilding teams can always shut down a player, make up some kind of reason not to play.
Although it does worry me, like when you mentioned,
I really hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, when you I think Dan, you mentioned OKC with because we were talking about Dort with Bones. I'm like, it does give me nightmares thinking about Bones and Shai in the same team, just that lanky, like how that would look like, especially in the division. Like I don't want to see that.
I'd like it a lot more than Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, to be honest with you. I'm not. I remain too low, probably too low on Josh Giddey. I've gotten a lot of crap for that.
You're fine now.
I don't know, man. I would love Giddey on the Nuggets. I would love him.
The passing is fantastic.
I personally love when someone's a shooter for, like, they can shoot first and everything else later, I guess.
Or shoot it all.
Fair. Yeah,
let's
with the
move
10-10 game with 0 points or something.
Yeah, I want to catch some other subjects, so I want to run through this fast. Let's go to the free agents. Dan, you've mentioned a guy like a Bruce Brown would be good for the Nuggets, and probably the best level of player they can expect for that small mid-level exception they will have in the offseason. Do you have, I'm putting you on a spot, do you have any other names that you could come up that would be useful rotation players for the Nuggets next season that fit that value?
Yeah. So we're looking at like 6.4 million, I think would be the top out of the mini MLE. So I think a reunion with Gary Harris would be far from the worst thing in the world. Still on the smaller end, not super long, but he quietly had a really good season for Orlando. His offense seems like it's back, and you can't imagine there'd be regression with Nikola Jokic there. I also think if you're really looking for more just like true wings, Pat Connaughton has a player option with Milwaukee. I expect him to decline it. I don't know if he prices himself out of the mini MLE market though. And then this is a name that I've brought up a few times with a couple of different teams, and I just think that a smart franchise is going to sign him. Is Amir Coffee was great for the Clippers this past year as they were navigating all their own absences. Someone who I don't know that you want to use him all the time as a point of attack defender, but they moved him all around defensively 1 through 4. He gave them some ball handling. He shot the 3 ball fairly well. And he has some, I wouldn't say speed off the dribble, but he will work off the dribble. They gave him some spot pick and roll duty. And then they also, he can turn a corner with his left hand and try and get to the basket. So there are names out there that I think the wing market is incredibly shallow. So it's going to be hyper competitive. But I do think that if the Nuggets are, I don't want to say get a little lucky, but I do think there are at least realistic names that they could look at, and Bruce Brown, again, being one of them, that should fall under that financial umbrella.
Well, so Bruce Brown, you said, and especially if he had I don't know, if he had a good relationship with Jeff Green might be like, hey, this is really good thing here. So, you might be able to have that in, especially with Amir Coffee. This is one of those, if Conley was here, it would be one of those, and maybe it's a lock to like get him, because that's like a player that you would want to be like, hey, let's see how this works out, because we always it's not a gamble. He's not a bad player. He's not he's Bruce Brown playing in like the Nets, or you say people saying KCP or Dorto, and these guys, they're more like quote unquote established. But Amir Coffee is like, I would love it. I have like this where like I love weird players. I love taking gambles on players, so that would be one of those, like. Especially also my Big Ten guy, so that'd be really fun to.
Oh, if you like gambles, Ball will probably be available next season.
Get the hell out of here! That's not gambling. That's just playing lottery and losing all the time.
Okay, I have one more dark thing to talk about, and that's Michael Porter Jr.'s future career. I don't want to skip this subject because I think it's valuable to speak about it, even though we all hope for the best with his future career. But what do you think then would be the most realistic and the worst scenario for the Nuggets with his contract that is just starting, the 5-year max that's starting right now?
The worst case scenario is that things just continue the way that they've been, where his availability is intermittent, and there might be seasons where he misses the vast majority, if not all of them. And you safeguard yourself a little bit with the partial guarantee on the final year, but that's a long ways away.
5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you guaranteed him. It was like I think he's guaranteed 146+ million. So like that's a lot of money. Best case scenario would be that he's just a superstar, maybe a little bit higher than Jamal Murray level, just because you look at his size and his ability to shoot over everybody. Even if you get to the Jamal Murray level where you're talking about, oh, he's in the all-star conversation consistently enough, even if he's not making those teams, that's huge. A more realistic outcome feels like it's going to be, this is someone that you overpaid, but he is still super useful to your team. And what at least helps you there is you don't need him to be, in theory, a superstar. And also the way that he can be used on offense, he can shoot over anyone. He can play off the ball. That in theory should be not as physically taxing. And so maybe that helps preserve his body. You also might be in a better position to monitor his minutes for the duration of this contract as well. I think where that becomes a difficult discussion is, well, if you're tamping down his responsibilities on offense, what does that mean for him on defense? Because he was never a great defender, but he had become, like, by the end of last season, a playmaking defender, whereas you could count on him to make plays around the basket. He was moving really well, and he knew how to use his size in certain spots. He might still be able to do all those things, but if you're worried about him taking on too much of a role on offense, it's not going to be easier to use him defensively. If he's stiff or if he just can't move the same way, there are going to be matchups that really hurt him. And then you have to go and build out the rest of your rotation on the margins in the image of what MPJ looks like on that end. Because I think it's, and I don't even think you need to argue, whatever happens, best case, worst case, middle end outcome, it's all workable for the Nuggets on offense because of the personnel that they have and then what MPJ can do, even if he is a reduced version of himself. The defense starts to put you in some interesting dilemmas just because Nikola Jokic, very good defender, not a defensive player of the year candidate, like I saw some people arguing. Jamal Murray, certainly not even, I don't even, like we've seen really great defensive toughness from Jamal Murray, but like a lot of the things in his career, it's felt inconsistent. So you're already dealing with two of your best players who are not, I would say, in any given matchup, you can't guarantee either of those players are going to be a plus defensively. If you now throw Michael Porter Jr. into that equation, only he's worse than them, I don't know what you're necessarily supposed to do. It becomes more difficult if you have three liabilities, again, in certain matchups, because I don't view Jokic as a liability. But if you have three liabilities in certain matchups, it's going to be really hard to win postseason series like that.
Yeah, I think, you're right with Michael Porter's worst, obviously, is what you said with this and that, like, trying to play, because even not playing ever for Nuggets, like, if he retires, like, I think how it works, like, I don't know if they're paying him or if it goes off the books or whatever the situation
they would be
is.
paying him, but they would get a exception.
Yeah, exception something. Yeah, so it's not, that's not the worst. The worst would be like he plays a few games, then he's out for the year, or like half of the year, and you never know if he's going to be back or not. Realistic is you're trying to low manage him for the year to try to tempt him to like a certain point to the playoffs. The problem is he's not Klay Thompson to like that he's been through it and he has these fundamentals that you can be like, yeah, we'll rest you every other game or every third game, and then we'll, and then in the playoffs you can ramp you up. And then realistically, I think that's the best case would be what you said, Dan, is he improves defensively and he becomes like an Andrew Wiggins route, not like a player type, but just like a route. Like he was supposed to be a superstar, got paid a lot of money, but just transitions into a really good role player. Like I would really love that if that's the case, because then at least like playmaking on defense, like we've seen so many like good blocks with him, and sometimes he can rotate. Like it's just getting routinely, and that's like one of those like the vicious cycle of he needs minutes to get used to the playing on defense, but you can't tax him too much on minutes because of his back. So it's gonna might end up being like, hey, we overpaid, we took a gamble, we lost. I still don't understand how Jamal Murray ended up with that top 5 defensive player of the year ranking or whatever the NBA.com had. I mean, it was still funny. I think they just wanted DeJounte Murray they had some weird stat that there's some weird stat that showed like people are not hitting over Jamal Murray. And he's like, so that's where we're gonna pull out. He's the better defender. So because I've seen people like argue, it's like, oh, bro, he was in one point he was a defensive player of the year candidate. Like, no, he's not. He can be like a big body, decent body size, and you can post him up and stuff like that. But he wasn't a top 5.
We do guys a disservice when we try and inflate like their skill sets, because you can't appreciate what Jamal Murray actually does or how much he has or will improve defensively if you're just he's already just defensive player of the year. Like he should have been all defense, or he's one of the best point guard defenders in the league. Like you do more damage by like touting those arguments. Yeah.
Well, that's why I think that's what with Jokic was. You said it, like people are saying defensive player of the year or all defensive team stuff. And like, let's not go overboard. He wasn't like he was not as bad as like his biggest detractors say, and he's really not as good as biggest supporters say. Like he's a really decent defender in certain positions. Like that's what I heard one of the guys from I think Rumble Rock podcast, they're on Fast Break Breakfast talking about Bielitsa, how everyone is. It's like one of those like it circulates through the league of like what specific type player is. It's like, oh, he's good shooter, good passer, shitty on defense. And it's like, well, actually, during the season he was actually really good on defense, which like yesterday in the game he showed he has really good positioning, and then with passing and shooting he wasn't as good as people were saying. And it's kind of with sometimes with with Jokic stuff like and these like defensive, because defensive numbers show this and this, and then you have to obviously always have contacts with these, and then when someone says, "Look at how good he is," others will say like, "Oh, you're basically like talking bullshit."
And they'll just make a video of like 5 minutes of him being blown out in the spread pick and roll, and they will prove you that Jokic is in fact not a good defender. But yeah, I agree. The defensive metrics are very wanky, and they can make a lot of disservice. I have to agree with Dan about the outcomes for Michael Porter's career, just to get back to that subject. Because if everything stays the same, and that means that he plays for 2 out of next 4 seasons, that's a disaster on a max contract. That's really the worst case scenario. I would actually put him actually putting his health before his basketball career and just ending it if he cannot stay on the court, like a second best scenario for the Nuggets, because as Voja mentioned, they would get some kind of cap relief because of that. Of course, Kronkis would have to pay his contract in full because everything is guaranteed. It's NFL.
Also sucks for him, like, but 23 and you have 3 back surgeries.
Listen,
like
man, I'm real happy because he has such a good agent and he got all of that money with his injury career. So I'm really glad that he got that money. I hope he'll stay healthy and earn some more.
Mark is the man.
Even if he doesn't, I mean, it's not a big tragedy. You can get a lot worse than $150 million, I guess.
And at least the move is defensible. I think they could have waited, but the season he was coming off, like that was, yes, if he was entering restricted free agency now, no, I don't think he's getting that money. But the Nuggets they've operated under like this, this franchise mantra of we're going to take care of our own guys. And like, that's their thing, is like they gave Jamal Murray the extension. So like, why wouldn't you give Michael Porter Jr. the extension? So even if it ends up being a bad deal, I don't think it was a bad decision by the Nuggets, just because when you are in this type of a market, you do need to sort of separate yourself in some ways. And they're paying their players. They're taking care of them a little bit earlier than some other more, I guess you'd call them callous or just cold and calculated teams might have.
I mean, Jokic, they declined the team option on Jokic in his max year, and they declined it to sign him on a max, so he's taken care of. Because it was funny, he was fourth, I think, in the MVP that year when they signed him finally, but they could have had him on a team option, which was like $2 million, and he might have been like top 4 in the MVP, like at $2 million.
I remember back then
going into free agency.
His agent Miško Ražnatović said, I really hope they won't be playing with fire and extending that $2 million option on him, because that wouldn't be the wisest thing to do with such a great player. Because yes, they can sign him on a rookie extension after that in restricted free agency, but that will not end well for the Nuggets. So
I'm pretty sure too that it was an even easier decision for them, because if they didn't decline a team option when he hit free agency, he was going to be an unrestricted free agent.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He was unrestricted.
That's
so
right.
That would have been franchise malpractice on their part.
Especially because we talk about, with this Serbian Corner from a perspective, as Serbians, like that would even. I almost guarantee that he wouldn't have signed back for the Nuggets if they had picked up that option, just because it would have been the disrespect. No matter how much money you can offer me, or like you're apologizing, or like giving the reasons, like screw you, like this is disrespect. Like I'm bringing you the top 4. He would have signed somewhere else. Probably would have went to San Antonio or one of those other teams like that would be like, hey, come here, like we'll take care of you. And I think that was the smart move. And again, you have to, if you do that to Jokic, then you do that to Jamal, turns out to be a good move. You have to keep going, because again, free agents are not flocking to come to. And
that's how the Nuggets have operated, which I think is smart, is that cap space means a lot more to teams in certain markets than it does in others. And it's more valuable to have Michael Porter Jr. to make that dice roll if he becomes the player you think he's going to be, than to bank on acquiring that player through means other than the draft. If Michael Porter Jr. pans out, the Nuggets have never signed a player like that in free agency. And
exactly.
And they've never really even traded for a player like that. So just because those players don't just become readily available, and teams that are in their markets are a little bit reticent to go all in on stars if they know that free agency is upcoming. So I get the argument for why the Nuggets could have waited, but that's one. That's just not how they operated. So that's the other thing, is it was never really on the table. But two, I understand the thought process behind what they did.
Yeah.
Okay, we are running a bit long today, and I don't think it will be a problem because Adam is probably already drunk.
You're playing golf. They don't know.
Yeah, so he probably won't even notice this. So we're going to the last segment for today, and that's the fish stew disagreements. And we're going to try and do a very tricky thing to predict how the Nuggets next regular season is going to roll out. This will most probably lead us to some disagreement because it's super hard to predict something like this even before draft. But I want to see which teams out of those top 4 teams, and those were Suns, Grizzlies, Warriors, and Mavs, could be overtaken by the Nuggets next season, and which play-in or worse teams from this season could actually surpass Nuggets next season. What do you think, Dan? What seems realistic to you?
They could realistically jump anyone who is ahead of them, I think, with the exception of the Warriors at this point. And I say that just there's a lot of uncertainty in Phoenix right now. Chris Paul getting older, Ayton going into restricted free agency. So I think it's realistic to think that they could finish as high as 2. I wouldn't even say that's their ceiling. Their ceiling is 1 if they're healthy. But when you're taking in that uncertainty, I'd say around 2 feels right. I'm not overly worried about any of the play-in teams behind them, aside from there's the Clippers, obviously, if they stay healthy. And the team I would keep an eye on, and spoilers, not the Lakers. I can't bring myself to care about the Lakers anymore.
Pelicans.
It's the Pelicans. I might be way too high on the Pelicans, but if you're going to tell me that Zion plays in 60 games next season, that's a team you need to watch out for based off how they closed the year.
Yeah, I know that was my first when you said Miroslav, when you said a playing team that can jump. My first thought was, I know it was probably unrealistic to think that, but it was Pelicans. Probably won't happen, but I wouldn't be shocked. Like I almost kind of root for them to go higher and just to be like a Memphis Grizzlies of the next season, just be like a fun story. Even without Zion, like just to go with this specific team. They can jump anyone. I think they might be hovering around 4. I just don't know after these couple of years without Murray. I think there's gonna be, and if Jokic, especially if Jokic plays in the Euro basket, that he might come in a little like hazier in the beginning of the season and not jump off at like the MVP level right away, and which we shouldn't even expect or want him to tax himself as much as he did the last 2 years. So I think 4-ish would be my. I had 5 for this season. I was close. I think like 4, even with healthy, because like, I don't know, this Nugget, they just don't inspire sustained like excellent confidence in me that they can go and run through the league. They always just play up to the competition, and that's one of those things I wish they just could root out of that team, just so they can, if they have a weaker team in front of them, they just steamroll like 3 or 4, 7 or 8, 10 games in a row if they could. They went to 9 and like relaxed on a Boston 20-point game and lost that after Gordon trade. So I still think it's 4 because I think the other teams might try harder in the regular season than the Nuggets, or just be present, I guess, in the beginning.
I would agree with that, and I think it's really, really important for the Nuggets to be in the top 4 next season, because we've seen what happened to them when they finish 6th. Yeah. Then you can get Golden State Warriors in the first round and just get almost swept by them, and we've seen how every other team had their amusement against the Warriors this season. Thing is, the Nuggets have Michael Malone as their coach, who is far from the perfect coach. He tends to take a lot of time in playoffs to adjust to a playoff series. So it would be good if the first playoff series would be an easier one. So even if they get in the 0-2 hole, they could dig out of it and get back, because if you try to do that against the Warriors, that won't happen. So yeah, I agree. I think the Nuggets really need to push for the top 4 seed. I don't know if you need to go much higher than that, risk any injuries in playing overplaying your guys at most. But I will fix them as like number 3, and I have no idea who the top 2 teams are really, because it could be Memphis, You know, it could be, I don't know, Dallas. It could be anybody really, because Phoenix Suns look like they should really refurbish themselves, because what they showed in these playoffs is not what they've been hoping to do. So yeah,
They might become
probably
if they don't change much, they might become the Utah Jazz, and just like still be the number one seed.
That's a dream scenario, really.
I mean, in that case, not the quality. I mean, they're probably better. Probably. It's such a weird. It was such a weird Game 7, that Suns thing. Like, I'm still not convinced that they're not good. I was never on their bandwagon. I was always like mad that people are like boasting them that high, because I was mad of like 10 years of lottery. Of course, you're gonna get a good team together. But I'm not on the piling on them and like being like they're frauds completely. Like I'm somewhere like on both ends. I'm like not on the extremes. So I still think that they could be number one seed next year too, unless they just start fighting within, in fighting, and the chemistry is gone because they're just that one game or one series. But that'll be fun. I mean, it'll be fun to see. I love this. Adam and the guys were talking about with. There's no Cleveland and Golden State like, oh, we were penciling them in for the finals and just waiting for the outcome. Now it's just so much fun because you don't know what to expect. Like, again, Boston was 11th in January and they just jumped in, and like now they might be in the finals. So I love NBA, how it's going right now with the parity.
Okay, for the very end of the show, give me your predictions for the NBA championship. First of all, I haven't seen a single match of Eastern Conference Finals. I don't want to watch that. Is there any chance for Miami to get to the Game 7? And after that, who is winning the championship? Is there a chance that the Golden State Warriors are not the champions?
Is there a chance? I think there's a chance. Boston, I'm really high on. I would be shocked if it's the Heat that make it to the NBA Finals. They're just so banged up right now.
Yeah.
I think all their half-court offense concerns they're coming to light at the worst possible time. Because in part of those injuries, Boston and Golden State, assuming that's the matchup, is something I still can't wrap my head around. The Warriors have looked like a buzzsaw, though, especially against Dallas, and I might lean towards picking them. But after some of the series and games that we've had to labor through this postseason, I'm just hoping that finals goes 7 and it's a classic, because as basketball fans, we deserve it after the basketball that we've sat through.
Yeah, Eastern Conference. I mean, that Milwaukee and Boston was fun. And even like Dallas and Phoenix was all like, there were 30-point games, 20-point games. Like this Eastern Conference Finals, I don't know if I've ever seen a worse. Like it's worse than a first rounder sometimes. Like at least in first rounder, one team is much better, so they're at least playing well. This is unbelievable that there have been like 4 or 5 games with the 20-point lead. Like all the games had a 20-point lead for some team. I'm going Boston 6. I love this team. I love the defense. I always lean on defense, but this is like my high school dream matchup for the finals. Like I was early on the Warriors bandwagon in like 2011, 2012. And obviously I love Boston for KG. So like even in high school, if you had told me like this is the matchup you're going to get in 10 years, I'd be like, cool, I'll get it. I said on Twitter, I'm fine with that matchup for the finals. Whoever wins. And then we can have a Denver dynasty. I'm good with that.
Okay. Thanks to everybody who was powering through with us for the last 69 minutes of their lives. Please go follow Dan on Twitter at Dan Favale, Favale. Did I do it right? Yes, and go listen to Hardwood Knocks. It's a really great general NBA podcast. So we'll see you when we see you, probably next week in another Serbian Corner segment, but who knows, we might make another impromptu show like this one next week again.
Thanks, Dan.
Take care, guys. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one.